Just a quick bit of background to paint a picture. Daniel, in his early career, worked at Microsoft, and he worked at the most senior level of Microsoft with Bill Gates. And he was a co-founder of eCorp, which was a business very familiar to many in this room, bringing to this country brand names like eBay, founder of 9MSN also. And as part of that patch, and it's interesting, a lot of books that are 18 years old about technology are looking pretty antiquated. Daniel, in 1996, wrote this, still available at all good bookstores. It's called The Clever Country, and most things that you read on technology that are nearly 2 decades out of date are showing their age. I did a quick refresher on this as a bit of homework. There's a chapter on education in this which stands up remarkably well, and we'll come to that. As well as being a great friend and supporter of SVA, investor in Good Start, Daniel's other passion is philanthropy, and we had the pleasure of doing in partnership with Daniel some media work around research that Daniel had funded that highlighted the then miserable levels of high net worth giving in Australia, something that Daniel, showing great moral courage and leadership on this, has been leading the charge on. He's passionate about education, he knows technology, and in the spirit of saying one thing that people might know about you, Daniel, in case they get the wrong picture, when I last caught up with Daniel, he very recently had the opportunity to fly in an FA-18, which he co-piloted. So if you ever get a chance, if you ever get a chance to ask him how that arose, I can assure you he didn't buy it at a charity auction. But Daniel, fantastic to have you with us.
Thank you.
We started this day with the very grounded anchor of 3 wonderful students who are in Year 10 and Year 12. And on the reasonable principle that if we care about outcomes, and an important outcome is equipping the students of today for the workforce of tomorrow, as a seer of technology, paint a picture, if you will, of how the workforce is changing and what you actually see happening to the nature of work over the next 20 years and beyond.
So a slightly long answer to a short question. If you have not read, there was an article in The Economist in early January called The Future of Work, and there was a paper referenced in that article, which is actually there's a seminal thing you should read, which is by 2 Oxford professors on the future of work. That was followed up about 2 weeks ago in the October 4 edition of Economist. They had a whole section on the future of work. So I'm basically just cheating now. I'm going to plagiarise everything they said. But it requires us to stop thinking that the human being is all that unique, and that in fact everything we do as a human being cannot be replicated by any other piece of machinery. That ship has sailed and continues to sail. The headline I'll give you of that piece, and I'll come back and go through some of the aspects, is that 46.2% of all American jobs will be either destroyed or severely impacted by technology within the next 10 to 15 years. Now, these are not underprivileged, undereducated workers at the lowest end of the manufacturing cycle. These are high-quality, educated university academics and graduates. So people who are lawyers, accountants, general practitioners, surgeons, dentists. All these careers will be impacted severely by technology. Now, we can go in, I could give you a 4-hour dissertation on why, but there are a small number of technologies that are going to dramatically impact, about 10 overall, but 3 that you'll need to think about. One is this concept of machine learning. And what's so central about that is that in the past, I was a programmer by trade and a statistician, we would program a computer to do something. Well, now we can program a computer to learn. So we can make it learn to be smarter and better and smarter and better. And recently you would have seen Watson, which is the IBM's kind of AI machine, win a Jeopardy. And that's kind of cool and funny, but what it reminds you is that a well-articulated machine learning algorithm has perfect memory, has perfect context, and is perfectly up to date. So I'll give you one example. So you walk into a general practitioner and you say, this hurts. What's happening there is you're relying on that GP, no disrespect to doctors. I wanted to be one. I couldn't get there by 5 marks. So this could be me having a go back. No, it's not. So you're relying on that GP's sense of memory, that they remember something about lymph nodes under there that they read about somewhere, and they send you off to a bunch of tests. You will be able to, in the not-too-distant future, you'll front up to a screen in your home, run by Siri or the Microsoft Virtue, Cortana or Watson, and you'll say, this hurts under the arm. It has perfect memory, perfect context, perfect data. It'll also send you off to a bunch of tests. But it also knows that yesterday in The Lancet there was a paper published about a new surgery or new issues with lymphoma and cancers, etc., etc. So there's no question that even a very highly specialised role like a general practitioner will be impacted. Of course, there's still roles going forward for specialists and people who can bring abstract ideas together, but the idea that that's a unique role disappears. And in fact, the rule you should use is that any job where there's a binary set of rules being applied, you're screwed. Because generally speaking, a computer can do it better than you. Let's move. So what does that mean about jobs? It means that there's two things. First, it means a lot of jobs will go to computers, machine learning first. Advanced robotics is the second one. So two examples of that. So autonomous or semi-autonomous driving cars. Google's had them driving in California now for over 2 years on public roads. There have been 2 accidents. Why? They were rear-ended by people. They didn't have the accident. And there's no question that we will live in a world where a lot of the driving jobs are done by semi-autonomous autonomous driving vehicles. There's no question. It'll start off in closed environments, forklift trucks running around manufacturing sites, delivering things. It's in hospitals now with this thing called the Hub, which runs around hospitals, delivering things. It knows the perfect map of distribution to take this medicine to this ward or this food to this ward. It can map it across what's the most efficient way to move things, and it has context about people. It's the Baxter Robot. If you've seen Baxter, Google it. It's a cool new robot where old manufacturing robots, the arm would swing to pick up this thing and put it there, and if you're a person standing there, then you just lost your head in the way. Baxter has context for people. And what Baxter will do is, you'll put Michael on the manufacturing line as a human being, you'll put Baxter here. Baxter will literally, through a screen camera, watch Michael, and then you move Michael away, and Baxter does the role. Now, you apply that. Now, so it's happening now. So you've lost your next job.
Where are the non-screwed jobs?
But I'll give you one more example, and we'll come back to what does it all mean. So take surgery. The most, a regular friend of mine's a number 2 cardiothoracic at St Vincent's, a great guy, I've mountain biked with him a lot. He will even tell you that 99.5% of his, what we would see as incredibly sophisticated surgery, is robotic in the sense that he knows what to do and how to do it. There's the 0.05, which if something goes wrong, you need someone there. But think about it, you have a robot now that watches 10,000 stent operations from the best 100 surgeons in the world. It will then have perfect dexterity, perfect consistency, won't be thinking about the kids' homework or the whatever. Now, I don't want to be the first guy having that operation, but Christian Barnard did the first heart operation on someone, so this happens, and so this will happen. So they're the higher level order jobs that will go. So what it means is that we as a society, we will have actually less paid jobs by commercial means. So there's a societal decision we'll have to make, which is what do we do as a society with the fact that a whole bunch of jobs go, and you can't just retrain people. This whole ridiculous idea that you take a Ford manufacturing worker, this lovely guy at 50 years of age or 45, and you'll turn him into a nuclear physicist in a couple of weeks, because that's the new kind of gig. It's just not going to happen. The harsh reality is that there are 3 criteria going forward, outside of skill sets, for success going forward. High abstract reasoning, creativity, and very high interpersonal skills. Now, if you are a brilliant scientist, you can forego probably a couple of those, but for the general population, you need those things. And not everyone will have those things. Not everyone can have those things developed. Not everyone will have those things internal to them. So there's a societal decision about what do we do with high unemployment? How do we cope with 25 to 30% unemployment? Do we have revolutions in the streets, or do we cope with it through a taxation system that then pays people to do jobs that we would not normally pay for, but in fact we need to have done to create social stability? In terms of kids coming through school, we have to make sure we're not just training them to be unemployed. And part of that is making sure in the school and education system generally, we understand the impact of technology. Now, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've seen a number of industries pretend technology won't impact them and then get decimated. And classifieds was the first, and retail was the second, and finance, healthcare, and education are the third. And the consistency is that, not people in this room, of course, but leaders in that industry believe it will never happen to them because they're different. And technology isn't good enough and will never be good enough, and guess what? It will and it can be. Long answer.
pretty challenging picture. We'll come back to some of the direct impact of technology in the education field, which I know is something you've studied pretty closely, but I guess one of the takeouts for that, Daniel, is an emphasis on those three characteristics that you spelled out as being the core criteria in terms of employment opportunities.
Yeah, I think, well, let's look at also the employment thread. So, and we talked this a lot, Michael, when that if you think about university, I'll come back to schools in a moment, but you think of universities, Michael fronts up as an accountant to get a job at PwC, and I'm the high. Now, what's a degree in effect? The degree really is just a proxy to say he's not an idiot. That's a proxy to say, look, he knows stuff, I don't need to check it, he knows stuff. And that works. So that employs universities now, because a lot of people are coming out with a bit of paper saying, I'm not an idiot and please hire me in a particular skill set. What if tomorrow, I had two graduates in front of me. I had Michael from UCED with a commerce degree, and I had Bill, or not Bill, Cameron. And Cameron happened to go, screw that for a joke, I'm going to do a whole bunch of Coursera courses on their signature track. I'm going to do Finance 1A at London School of Economics. I'm going to do Economics 1A and 1B at Stanford. I'm going to do da-da-da-da. And I go, which do I think is the most applicable set of courses undertaken to give the skill sets for my job? I might decide it's Cameron. The moment that happens, the nexus between university and employment has gone. And it's happening today. 7 million people, Coursera gets smacked around a lot by MOOCs, by people who don't understand MOOCs. 7 million people are doing MOOC on Coursera today. 7 million.
Just explain where are MOOCs at?
Sure.
Let's work on the basis. We need to
okay, so we know what MOOCs are. Okay, so MOOCs are massively open online courses, and it's arguably you can find the best course, the best lecturer in Economics 1A, and you can watch that lecturer wherever you happen to be. That's only part of the story. So the true education revolution in technology is accessibility to the best. And we can argue about how do you decide the best? Is it crowdsourced? Is it voted by serious academics on top of a mountain? Or who decides who's the best? But there'll be a way to decide who's actually a good Economics 1A and who's a crappy Economics 1A. That part can be solved. It's been solved in hotels and flights and everything else. It'll be solved for teaching. The next part is, how do you get the skill change? How do you get the skill development? So now I'm enthused. I've watched this fantastic MOOC. I'm just so enthused about that. How do I actually learn stuff? Well, for a lot of skill development, adaptive learning platforms are the answer. Now, adaptive learning platforms, for those who aren't aware, I'm sure most of you are, it's machine learning as applied to education. What it is I'm doing maths, I'm doing some maths courses. They apply specifically really to STEM binary subjects, less so to obviously the arts faculties, but in the STEM specifically, and moving to those others. So I'm doing maths, and I get this thing wrong. Now, any software can say, here's the next question. The trick is offering the right next question. Now, if that software is deeply algorithmic in how it thinks about, well, Cameron can't do subdivision, but actually he's okay on 3-unit subdivision. He can't do 2-unit for some strange reason. And particularly in 2-unit, he can't do ones where it starts with a 7 for some strange reason. So what it does is it finds out of the 10 million kids out there doing this stuff in big data, it finds people like Cameron go, okay, well, we offered this kid a next question like that, and that worked, and we offer that question to Cameron. So it can offer you exactly the right next question. Not kind of, not sometimes, but exactly. Does it work? So University of New South Wales have been running, for their mechanics, it's the first and second year students, have been running a MOOC with adaptive technology. And what they've noticed, my numbers here, I'll make sure I'm accurate with them. So they've reduced the failure rate from 31% to 7%, just by application of adaptive technology in that school. And more importantly, the distinction and high distinction rate's gone from a combined 17% to a combined 44%. These are not 2% movements in success. These are dramatic improvements because Cameron's getting exactly what he needs at the right time. So Coursera is really now about kind of MOOCs in the sense of the best lecturer, and what's coming behind it are the adaptive platforms. And the combination of those two things allows you to provide consistency of approach and accessibility. Now, my favourite accessibility, which you've all heard the story about, the backstory about it too, which is the guy, the MIT kid in Mongolia. I never get his name right, but it's Butushig Mayangayabaya. If everyone who's from Mongolia, I apologise if I got that wrong. But everyone knows the story, right? He's a 15-year-old kid who was one of only 340 kids out of 150,000 to get a perfect score in circuits and electronics course from MIT. Everyone knows that story. Now, what's cool is accessibility. Some kid in Mongolia got to sit that course. And so it blows out, it makes the internet's made it available to everyone. The backstory is that how did he get to see that MOOC? Well, because his teacher was the first ever Mongolian to go to MIT. And he came back to Mongolia and he said, kids, you're going to watch this MOOC. And that's where it all started. So there's a lovely combination of a teacher who was globally aware on the best practices in education delivery and a story about accessibility to low developed countries, and this kid's now got a scholarship.
Wow. Daniel, paint a picture, and I know you track very closely what's happening in the US in terms of both the funding and the market for EdTech, education technology. What is the state of play? And then I want to come back to the issue about how this is actually playing out in schools.
So, you know, in all these things, if you're looking at innovation and where's it going to eventually impact, you look where's the money going? Where's the smart money going? And this has happened historically in technology. You've watched where the money's flowed. So in 2013, in EdTech alone, there was in the US alone, in EdTech alone, there was $1.3 billion of venture capital money invested. In the first 2 quarters of 2014, there was $870 million spent in EdTech VC. Now, remembering, no one's building hardware here. This is all software, and you can buy a shitload of software for $870 million. And there was over 400 deals. So what the point is, there are very, very, very bright people getting very, very large amounts of money to come up with solutions to the education delivery problem, to consistency and accessibility.
I mean, you gave a spectacular example of accessibility for the kid in Mongolia. What are you seeing in terms of, and there's a fault line in this, is there not, between there's capital and resources required to access technology. Yes, as the web becomes more available, it's more accessible for kids irrespective of location, but there are still limiting factors in terms of the capacity to access that. And what permeates this audience is the challenge of how do we make this accessible, available? What is the role of all of this in improving opportunities and access for kids who are frequently excluded?
So yeah, as all these things are, they're multivariate problems and they're hard to sort of, provide the silver bullet. But the first thing we need to solve for is accessibility, high-speed accessibility, which we're not really solving for. And there's been this whole hoo-ha about NBN, and sadly, we do need to have every kid able to get on a high-speed internet link wherever they happen to be in this country. If we don't do that, it's like taking water away from them in the future. It's literally a disaster. So assuming some bright sparks in government work that out over time and solve for that, the next problem is, what do they access? And that's where there's now a massive fault line, because our department, I hope there's no one, is there anyone here from the Australian Curriculum Commission? No. Good, I can name them then, perfect. So I've spent a lot of time with people like that, not the nice people, I'm sure, and they have great around a barbecue and a glass of red watching a footy game, but in terms of getting the best delivery of the latest curriculum and tools down into schools, a disaster. And we have this insular nature in education in Australia, which is it's often insular within a school or within a region or within a state or within a nation. We kind of think no one else is doing it any better than us. So the second part of the problem is how we pivot the system to make sure we are accessing the best curriculum delivery tools in this broadest definition possible, and we review that decision every few months, because guess what? Every few months it's going to change. We're on this curve now in technology. Bill Gates, who I worked with for many, many years, has this sort of phrase recently where he said that the advancement of technology in the next 10 years will be 5 to 10x over the last 10. So just think back what's happened over the last 10 and try and get your head around what could be the next 10. So it's not about okay, we've got a science course, we bring it down for all kids in Australia, good, that's done, let's go sit back and have a tequila. No, the point is that we need to review that every 3 months because it's going to change. So we need to pivot the system to be as you would in business, which is you're paranoid that tomorrow someone's doing it better than you. At Microsoft, when I was on the executive committee of Microsoft for a few years, around the table with Gates and Barmer and Moritz and those guys, and if you'd filmed that conversation, you would have assumed we were a startup with had $2 in our pocket, and we didn't. We had like $15 billion of cash, and we were producing $8 billion a quarter in gross margin or something. So we weren't cash strapped. But the mindset was, oh my God, someone's going to go wake up smarter than us tomorrow. In fact, they did in a few areas. But the point was, that's what education needs to do. As a delivery mechanism, so the people responsible for curriculum delivery need to pivot and go, oh my God, someone tomorrow is going to wake up smarter than us. And if we don't deliver that to our kids tomorrow, we are actually destroying our children going forward. And that's not happening today in education.
Interesting.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Daniel, let's just drop down into the school context. So as a parent of 3 daughters, you've had an involvement, including as chair of a P&C. So you've looked inside schools as a parent and more closely. What actually are you seeing happen, and what needs to happen? So what is and one of the things you did raise in your book, which I thought was extremely present in the chapter on education, was the notion of, in a technology age, parent and teacher as guide rather than necessarily content deliverer.
Yeah, and there's still a struggle. I was a chair of a school council for a number of years, and I've been heavily involved, so I've tried to see it from the teacher's side as well as from the parent side. And we still have, generally speaking, you've got to be careful, a teaching fraternity that is technology, not technology comfortable with technology. See it as either a threat or a tool they don't know how to use, which is a huge problem, a massive problem. And we also see teachers, and I'll step up to lecturers as well, who still see themselves as having to be experts, subject experts. And the simple reality is they are not. Or maybe 2 of them are globally, but they are not. And until they get comfortable with the idea of sitting alongside the students and the students discovering things they didn't know about and being comfortable with that, we have a massive problem. And until we have every single teacher being hired on their propensity to use technology, we have a massive problem. And that goes back across all employment, by the way. Whether we like it or not, you have to understand how technology works and how it impacts you. So those 2 things, I think, need to change in the school environment, and it's not changing fast enough.
Yeah. And just to close with a very practical and grounded question, we're in the presence of bright spots principals who are very open-minded, of global luminaries who are thinking differently and creatively about the challenge of diffusion and change. If we made you a bright spot principal or head of a science department in a school and you've got a budget of X, let's call it $1 million with 20 teachers, what are you going to do differently to put into practical shape the sort of things you're talking about that'll make a difference? And by the way, you can't increase the budget.
Okay. Can't call Bill?
Well, you might, mate. The rest of us can't.
Okay. Oh, well, that's my first idea. Anyway, okay. So I think the reality is, and you picked a good subject because it's a STEM subject. If you picked kind of studies of religion, it would be a lot harder answer. But I would say, right, I'm going to take 20% of my faculty. First, I'm never going to hire another teacher who isn't actually able to utilise new education delivery tools. Don't know how nice they are, how funny they are, or how clever they are. They can't do that. It's a material skill they haven't got, so you later buy. So that's the first thing. Second thing is I would take 20% of my faculty and I would say your job is to source the best curriculum tools, both from teacher and student, available globally, and work out how to integrate those into our curriculum. And then I'd recast the classrooms to say, I'm going to use a lot more MOOCs, I'm going to have a lot less one teacher to classroom, a lot more this with maybe 3 teachers, and yada yada. So I'd re-architect it that way.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a good practical note to close on. We did say this would be a challenging session. Daniel, I think that's painted a really interesting, compelling, forward-looking picture that's going to deeply inform our conversation.
Brilliant.
Can you please join me in thanking Daniel Petre?